Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Live Sewer Roundtable discussion. This is episode number 4. Last episode, we talked about the repercussions of the low bid, which was a very interesting topic where we talk about, best value and all the things that happen in low bid and why sometimes that's not the best way to execute procurement in government. Today, we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to talk about some ways that wastewater probably hasn't not been thought of. For all of you listening and are all in our comments, feel free to chime in where you're from, who you are, ask us questions, make comments before we get fully started here. And, join in the conversation. We always love that. Alex loves that. Eric loves that. So it's just a fun thing for us to keep engagement. We do have a guest with us that we're going to go over here in a bit. But today's topic is going to be wastewater surveillance. So thanks, Cassie, for joining. Wastewater surveillance. I've never even thought of wastewater surveillance, but to get started, we're going to do the introductions, and I'll start with Eric. Let us know, Eric, where you're from, what you're doing, and then we'll walk through that process, and then we'll get started about surveillance.
Eric Dupre here from Houston, Texas, representing Texas. And basically, I do wastewater infrastructure consulting, a lot of trenchless technologies and a lot of new modern technologies to monitor wastewater systems. That all of this stuff basically needs to get fed into and integrate into like asset management systems for a lot of these owners. So Texas Info Group is the company that I own. And we basically do consulting to get whatever clients need to pretty much get moving forward with their wastewater sewer systems, mainly leak detection, SSOs, and better asset management of their existing infrastructure is what we do.
Thanks, Eric, for joining me and the show. Alex, you're up next.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chad. It's been a long time no talk since I saw you just a couple of days ago at the WET show in Indianapolis. But Alex Churchill here. I'm the CEO and one of the owners of InfoSense. We're the Charlotte, North Carolina-based manufacturer of the product called the Sewer Line Rapid Assessment Tool. And we help municipal utilities optimize how they maintain their sewer systems and help them save a lot of labor hours, equipment time, flushing water, and money in their efforts to prevent SSOs and be proactive in their collection system maintenance program.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to go to Cassie, and then I'll do Andrew at the end. We'll do the introduction with Andrew. Go ahead, Cassie.
Thanks, Chad. I'm Cassie Clancy. I'm the owner and CEO of Pipe Reline Solutions. We really look at stormwater and wastewater issues, and then we come in basically as consultants and distributors of different products that will work for repairing. I'm based in Boise, Idaho, and I cover the Northwest through the Rockies down to Nevada.
That's awesome. Thanks, Cassie, for joining us. I'm excited to talk to you some more. Andrew, you're up, and just really quick introduction. Andrew is the stuff you were telling me, Andrew, before we jumped on the live infrastructure network here. It's amazing your background of wastewater surveillance, the things you've done for COVID. So thank you so much for doing those things and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Great pleasure to meet everybody. It's really nice to have people from all across the US. I'm actually based in Bristol, England, although I work for Candu. So I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Candu. We're a data and AI company. We provide real-time intelligence from wastewater data. I think we're going to talk a lot more about wastewater data and the kind of intelligence you can get out of it. So I won't go too deeply into that, other than to say we work with utilities to really solve their major problems in real-time network monitoring. But what Chad was alluding to is that before that, I was actually a senior civil servant. I've left the civil service last year. But I was a senior civil servant in the UK, and I was actually running the UK Health Security Agency. Previous to that, the Joint Biosecurity Centre COVID monitoring program from wastewater. So I know a little bit about what went on in the COVID response. Really, really interesting topic here, and so pleased to contribute to the conversation. So looking forward to it. Thanks, Chad, for inviting me.
Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. And this is one of those things I've thought about ever since COVID. And it's like, monitoring wastewater to understand more about where COVID was present within these communities and how it was impacting these communities was very intriguing. It's something that I don't think a lot of people thought about. Eric, have you ever thought about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we get SSOs, one of the biggest things that we're not talking about sanitary sewer overflow is not just the environmental impact, but the health impact. I mean, you got raw, untreated sewage with bacteria and everything else under the sun in the sewer system has SSO'd. It's leaked up and out of your system, and it's canvassing and blanketing the ground and the living environment that we live in. So, I've thought about that to a great detail, especially in Texas. I saw their rapid response to technology to show where COVID was popping up all over Texas. And they built that like in record time, in like 12 months, an amazing system that would track the whole state of Texas of hot spots and green spots, whether COVID was rapidly growing here or growing there. And I'm like, this is the same stuff we've been talking about, asset management. Y'all built the system in 12 months for that. So there's other systems where you can integrate the exact same technology. So yeah, I've definitely thought about it from a technology standpoint of view of how we could be proactive with that kind of technology.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be important here in these discussions, I'm sure Andrew is going to elaborate on this, is you said about 12 months. It took 12 months to establish. One of the things that I've realized is we didn't have enough information, and we didn't know how fast it was being exposed and how many people were getting sick and all these things. And then how we were using wastewater to kind of determine that was very unique. And I don't think we utilized it as much as we could have. Alex, what do you think about wastewater surveillance when someone would say that to you?
I mean, I think it's a great idea. There's a tremendous amount of information in our sewage. We are what we eat, and what goes through us. And we do some flow metering work, and it's amazing the information you can even find from some of these diurnal studies. And I've seen some very interesting stuff about what type of concert goer drinks the most beer. And you can actually look at that from flow meters and which concerts when, and when the peak flow is at the concert hall during the intermission, and et cetera. And I've also, even before the COVID situation, I've read a number of studies about drug use and being able to identify things such as prevalence of different types of drugs in different communities, and in what areas those drugs are most prevalent. A lot of stuff we can glean from our wastewater. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of creepy. And I know we're going to talk. I got some ideas of how to bring this up. But Cassie, when someone says wastewater surveillance, what do you think about it?
When you invited me to talk on this chat, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to actually think about this and think of, in my mind, COVID was probably the first time I had ever actually thought about how we test things going through the sewer system. Obviously, in my role, I look at the condition of the pipe and not so much think about what we're testing in the water, because that kind of creeps me out. But yeah, I think it's interesting because there is, obviously, from my perspective, there are chemicals that run through the different types of pipe that break it down faster, that then obviously affects the longevity and the design life for engineers when they're looking at repairing or replacing pipes. So looking at the chemicals and the things that are in there are important from an engineering perspective, or just a monitoring perspective.
Yeah, 100%. We're talking about different types of polyurethanes and the things we use for the resin for curing pipe and things like that. All that kind of ties in with the wastewater, right? It all goes together, and then it all goes into the waterways that we all like use and drink and swim in and whatever else. So a lot of information there that I think Andrew is going to elaborate on, because Andrew, you've been in this space for such a long time now. Andrew, what got you into wastewater surveillance? What got you so excited about that? Curious.
Oh, that's a funny story, but yes. So I'm humbled because I'm with a group of people who are, experts and professionals in the field, and wastewater better than I. I actually am from a data background. So before the COVID response, I was actually working for our Office for National Statistics, which is about the same as your Census Bureau in the States. Um, and I was asked to come into, there was a new unit that was set up in our Prime Minister's office called the Joint Biosecurity Center. It was going to be the Data and Analytics Center for our COVID response. I can see you going, what has this got to do with wastewater? So my task was to collect information from across government, from the business community, to get data to help us respond to COVID. And that was right at the beginning of the response. Well, day one, it was a funny story. We got a call from Prime Minister's office and they said, well, how many people have COVID? We said, we don't know. So there is no data source. And in fact, we still don't know how many people had COVID. I call it the great missing statistic of the pandemic. So I started to lead this effort to look for data sources that could actually tell us, sort of what's the denominator here. And that's when I became really interested in wastewater and the potential of wastewater to provide that answer. And indeed, I think it can provide that answer. And not only that, but it can provide lots of other answers as well. So I don't know if that's a long story short or a long story medium short, but that's how I got involved in wastewater. In wastewater, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and I'll read this down because I did some research last night, but wastewater surveillance, early detection of disease outbreaks, monitoring the prevalence of infectious diseases, tracking the spread of variants of concern, assessing the effectiveness of vaccination programs, monitoring drug use, which Alex brought up, and then evaluating the impact of environmental contaminants, which you just brought up, Cassie, basically. Monitoring antibiotic resistance, assessing population health, tracking the presence of emerging contaminants, providing early warning for bioterrorism. Wow. Like that's some crazy stuff that we probably underutilize. Well, we do underutilize. But if you think about that, first thing I thought of was privacy.
Yeah.
Like, how do we have all this data? And I know we're going to break this down, but think about that, Eric, as you look at, your body, what Alex said, you take it in, it goes out, right? It's like, but that's a DNA sample of like your body, right? And I know Andrew's kind of going to elaborate on this because that's the question I'm about to ask him. But Eric, what do you think about that as far as a privacy standpoint?
No, I mean, it's all commingled together. So by the time it makes it into the main line, makes it to the plant, it's a combination of a mixture of that whole area combined. So I don't think they're sampling just individuals. And if you have multiple people living in one house or building, you can't. So what's great about that though is you're taking chemicals and you're analyzing chemicals that are coming in there as a collective group. So it's telling you that whole area, this is what's being outputted from this entire area, which is kind of genius if you think about it, because it'll tell you the overall score of what's going on in that particular area from a biometrics standpoint. So it's the collective group in that one area that you can kind of analyze, and then where it's tied to individually. You'd have to trace it all the way back to a particular house, but what you're really trying to do is see what's going on in a grouped area. So I think that's a really unique concept and idea that I never really thought about, but you're getting a collective sample, a large sample base from that particular area. So you can actually kind of predict and understand what's actually going on in that particular area probably pretty rapidly.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I was thinking about it. But then, the privacy thing always jumped out. Alex, what do you think about the privacy standpoint of what data you can get out of the wastewater?
Well, I think Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of these other social organizations and or social media entities and other companies, Amazon and so on, probably have a lot more information about us that you might want to be concerned about than what's coming through the sewage. I think like to Eric's point, that it's largely going to be aggregated and anonymized, and that's more information in an aggregate level is probably what we're looking at, not any one individual's contribution to the overall system. And one of the things we also didn't mention is industrial users, industrial discharges, and illegal discharges as well.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that one. That's a real good point. Cassie, what do you think about the privacy part of this?
I kind of agree with Alex. It's you've got so much information out there already, and we're not honing down onto one particular house. You're not really jeopardizing anyone's specific privacy when you're just looking at the data as a collective group.
Yeah, I like it. I guess to make it the question to go to Andrew about the privacy part of this, is there an ability to actually separate it to an individual?
It's a great question, complicated question, but
Yeah.
I'm going to come in fairly strong here and say, right.
Sure, go for it.
The thing is we need to ban the word surveillance because it's the wrong word.
I think so.
The reason why it's called surveillance is because epidemiologists use the word surveillance to mean something very specific, but that translates into something very different in sort of the real world. So when we talk about wastewater surveillance, we're borrowing a term from a group of people who actually don't really like what we do in the wastewater anyway. So it's just the wrong term. So in Candu, we always talk about community health monitoring, and that's literally what we're doing is we're looking at the health of our communities, not any individual. So just on a technical perspective, I think Eric is exactly right, is actually there's no DNA at all. So we don't even look at DNA. We literally look at virus. So I know it's a little sort of, people get hung up on it, but we're looking at viral fragments in the wastewater, and those pass through people, but they don't belong to anybody. So it's a really odd area, so what kind of individual ownership do we have over something that's passed through us, gone into the wastewater system, but is not part of our DNA at all? Complicated question in an ethical sense, but pretty clear from a sort of DNA privacy sense. It doesn't violate any privacy. Can I just say one thing about drugs monitoring? I want to illustrate this with drugs monitoring.
Go for it.
When we talk about surveillance, we really talk about three different things that we do to get to the end point. And the first thing is what is it that we're looking at to get the data in the first place? So what's the material itself? The second thing is the data that we get from the material. So how do we turn material into data? And then the third thing is what do we do with the data, right? So sort of surveillance is a blanket term that covers all of that. Everybody comes back to drugs, because I think we can all understand, we don't want, we don't want people showing up, knocking on our door saying, we think that you, peed something into the sewer system, right? That's not really ideal. Right. But let me tell you what actually I think is a really, when we did a lot of work with the public and we asked them what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, knocking at the door, they didn't like that. But on the other hand, what you can do, forget individual drug use, but actually you can monitor the chemicals of illegal drug factories that are producing so many counterfeit drugs and all the rest of it. They're just devastating our communities, devastating our populations. Are we for that? Probably. That's probably a good use of wastewater data, much more appropriate, much easier to do, and actually got a really positive community health benefit. So, it's not just the data itself, it's what you do with the data. I think that's what makes people uncomfortable. And I always say to people, worry less about the data, but worry more about what we do with the data. And I think we'll get to a much more positive rather than that sort of scary result. Bottom line for me is if you want to know if somebody's, got something or doing something illegal, probably much more effective to knock at the door rather than sitting outside kind of hoping at some point they're going to go to the toilet, flush it, and you're just randomly going to catch it. Very inefficient way of doing law enforcement if you really wanted to do that. So, there's better ways of doing it.
Oh, that's a good point. I thought there goes my second business of drug dealing, because you're gonna match, you're gonna find it, you're gonna like pinpoint where I'm doing all the processing. Anyway, it's a whole. I'm just joking around.
Yeah.
But
just don't be making any methamphetamines, all right?
Good point. So why, Andrew? Why do you think this hasn't? So COVID started, right? All this. We need to track COVID. We need to figure this out. We're in 2023 now. How has the technology been adopted in the world for you, in what you guys do at Cando?
Yeah, great question. Actually, really, I sort of almost want to throw it back to the panel here because
Sure.
you say the word technology. Technology covers a lot of things. There's a lot. We're doing really well in the labs, right? So if you go to the labs, and I think we've got great protocols that we've built up, all that sort of stuff. Lots of really smart scientists doing that. We're pretty good on the data side of things, got lots of smart epidemiologists, bioinformaticians, fantastic. We're not doing so well on the insights side of things yet because people are still trying to wrap their head around, sort of community health, what that means, fine, but that will come. But the bit that actually we need a lot of help is on what most people thought was the easiest part, but they hadn't really talked to the wastewater community. This was public health people. They thought, oh yeah, well, the wastewater guys will sort this out. Actually, the sampling part's the hardest part. And that's where we really need help from the tech industry. That's where we really need a lot of innovation. It is taking place, but it could probably be supported better.
Yeah.
If you want my personal opinion, I think the government is not sending the signals the industry needs, the correct signals. Industry responds to market signals, and I think it's government's response to set clear market signals in an emerging space like this. And there's probably more that should be done there. But yeah, the tech, the actual sampling technology is the place I think that, people in this room, people out there in the wastewater space can really make a huge contribution.
Yeah. Cassie, do you think that this would be something service-wise oriented that you could get into down the road? I'm just curious.
Yeah. And I actually have more questions and answers on this one, Chad.
Go for it.
I guess, Andrew, what I'm wondering, or to all of you, is this a federal issue? Is this the national government that should be dictating what we're monitoring and who's monitoring it? Or is this coming down to a county and municipality level, a state level? Like, where do you see that? Because I primarily would work with like a public works department, right? So we offer tools for them to inspect pipe, but is this something where you need to get down to that specific? I mean, we're talking, imagine how many municipalities we have in each state, or is it something that should be on a broader scale that's dictated down to the smaller agencies?
Andrew, that's a question for you. I can't answer that one.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry, I don't want. Eric, by the way, we are doing sewage monitoring for COVID in Texas, actually. So, and I know quite a bit about TEFI, the Texas program. So happy to talk about it. Cassie, it's a fantastic question. I've got a strong view on this. I think that it's government should not be funding this, and we shouldn't expect government to fund it, and government shouldn't say it's going to fund it. I don't think that's a sustainable funding model. I'm not sure the taxpayers really want it that way. Currently, there is a federal program. I think it's funded to about $200 million, NWES, and currently that's funded by the CDC. The money goes to State Department of Health. Predominantly, that money is spent on public laboratories, not on anything else. And, to my way of thinking, the problem is that there's no benefit to the utilities of doing this at all. They don't get anything for it. And yet they're actually the ones, the sewage is flowing through the utilities networks. And fundamentally, Chad and I were talking about this a little bit before. I think fundamentally, we've got a massive amount of data flowing through the sewer system. And literally everything that we do as human beings is reflected above ground, is reflected below ground. I loved Alex's point about illegal discharges. I'll slide in. That's our core business in Candu, is actually detecting illegal industrial discharges. But fundamentally, we've got to, I think, help the industry understand that we're just like we said, Facebook and Twitter, monetizing data is, that's the 21st century. That's the digital economy, and we shouldn't expect government to be pumping in tax dollars to do something. I think that the private sector could do far more effectively if we just, get the business model right. So,
Eric, I think you go ahead, Alex.
No, I was just wondering what the business model would be. Subscription-based data collection, and then how would you manage that? Because it does appear to me, from my little knowledge of the world, that the UK, you have a much more centralized government there in Whitehall, and you have the you also have your National Health Service, where you've got a much more integrated entity. Where here in the U.S., we part of how we like our freedom is we like to disperse power across thousands of different entities. So then we have thousands of different entities that all want to do stuff their own way, and it makes it very difficult for. I'll speak for myself, but possibly for Cassie and Eric as well, that when we try to do something, I can do something in town X or city Y or community Z, and I can go next door and they say, yeah, I don't want to do that. And that's the way it is. They're the king of their own castle.
Yeah.
I
can give you Eric, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but I'd love also just to give an answer, which I think hopefully might flip the switch a little bit on the conversation. But Eric B.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, monetizing and how, it's a benefit back to the taxpayers, the people themselves. So you collect their data, it's their data. So, it's our personal public data. And then what are we going to do with that on a personal level? Because the government can collect all this information and data about us and what's happening. But if we don't actually take individual action to self-correct it, it kind of comes back to this. It's like we can collect information. We have policies in place for certain things. If there's no policy to say you must, shall, or can do this kind of stuff, is kind of what, if you don't, in policy, if there's not a policy that says you have to do this, most people they're not going to sign up unless they see some kind of a massive benefit, which you would think health is kind of beneficial, but everybody monitors and regulates and has their own different philosophy on what they consider to be healthy. So, monetizing it, who's in charge of it, what we expect to get out of this, and then what kind of positive benefit change. We've collected said data. We put that data out in the public domain. Okay, now what do you do with it? The people still have to make choices and healthy decisions, and human beings are good at being human beings. They're very stubborn, and they just kind of do whatever the hell they want to do regardless of policy.
Can I try to flip the switch just a little bit?
Yeah.
I think because as soon as we said health data, everybody starts thinking about all public health, and we start thinking about COVID mandates and all that sort of stuff, right? Just to note that in the UK, we actually asked the question, well, who owns these data? And the answer is nobody knows. Like literally, we don't know. Nobody asked the question before. When I was going around government, I was going around and everyone was like, what do you mean who owns? Nobody asked the question before. We just assumed that if utilities do testing, they own the data from the testing. Well, why is that true in chemical space and not true in, for viral monitoring, given that the virus, as I just said, is not individual? So, it's an interesting thing. But right, come back to Eric T. Use. This, let me tell you something, right? So when we were when I was in government, I got one of my data teams we commissioned a very large AI company that I can't mention, but we commissioned them to build a model for us. And using just wastewater data, we could predict with a 10-day lead time and a 91% accuracy what the demand for ventilator-equipped beds was going to be in one hospital. Wow. That's a game changer right there. Now, it actually turns out in COVID that we didn't run out of ventilator-equipped beds. Funnily enough, I mean, everyone thought we did, but we didn't. Well, we ran out because we never got there because we ran out of staff. Before we ran out of beds, we ran out of staff to run the beds, actually. So guess what? Staff get sick. So if you're predicting, if you can predict who's getting what, you can actually predict when people get sick. In fact, you can predict when people are going to show up to work. In fact, the biggest challenge running a hospital is just resourcing. It's all about how you schedule surgery, non-essential surgery, all of that sort of elective surgery, all that sort of stuff, right? So in fact, we can run our hospitals a lot better just using wastewater data, amazingly. Well, I think that a hospital should probably pay for those data. If we can help hospitals run better, private hospitals, then surely wouldn't it be fantastic if a utility can sell those data to a hospital? Everybody benefits. And guess what? At the end of the day, your sewerage bill goes down. Well, fantastic.
Andrew, calm down. You're making sense. You're making too much sense, Andrew. Calm down.
That's community health, right? So I want to blow some of the stereotypes out the water and say, no, I think there is a really good business model here. This is why I think business should be involved and not government, because we won't get that. Just to be straightforward about it. That's why I went into the private sector. That's the drive I'm trying to get to. That's what we're doing in Texas. So watch this space.
That's interesting, because I did want to touch up on like why you went back to private sector. We kind of had touched on it when you and I first talked, but when you were doing all this COVID analysis and helping countries figure out where COVID was prevalent and problematic and things like that, like what forced you to go back to private sector? That would seem like as a civil servant, like that you would want to stay there, right, and help the communities. What forced you to get out of private sector? One thing we do here on those live events, we talk about problems, but we also talk about solutions, but we also talk about the government problems a lot of what's going on internally with low bids and things like that. But why did you go back to private sector?
Yeah. In this safe space that's going out to your
the whole world. Let's just talk about it.
No,
you don't have to. It's a setup question, but
I will tell you very straightforwardly, and I'm proud of it. Not hiding it at all. We actually had a great program during COVID, and we were able to innovate at a pace that I think just blew everybody out of the water, including the private sector. So I just as a story, we started a prime ministerial innovation fellowship, the same as your presidential innovation fellowships in the US. I got the first one into my team, the first guy. So he was a founder in a company, Amplified, quite well known. Came in. They were supposed to help us innovate and everything else. He spent 2 months in my team. He said, your team is more like a startup than any startup I've ever been in, right? That was in government, right? But that was in COVID, and there are all sorts of reasons why we were able to do that. And I loved it. We had effectively an innovation accelerator, and we brought to maturity a program that would have taken, well, years, if not decades, to have built in normal times.
Wow.
And then we went back to peacetime. And, slowly but surely, I could see that, there it was. We were just on the cusp of doing something fantastic, revolutionary, brilliant. And everybody said, oh, yeah, but now we're going to go back and do things, business as usual. And I said, you know what? It was under my skin at that point. I got into the wastewater industry. I started working with, amazing creative thinkers. And I said, I don't think I can just go back to, sitting there at, working at the pace of government. So, literally that's what led me. Yeah.
Well, you just, and you blew my mind, because if you think about this, you guys had a startup incubator in a government agency, a technology that the private sector would have probably bought at some point in time. Or at least wanted to get involved with, right? Could have funded it. It could have done all these different things, and they just left it go. That's amazing. That's a huge problem with government. Is we have all these great tech and these great ideas, and the government gets involved, but we don't utilize. The government isn't utilizing that as a way to monetize and help fund these communities too, right? If you had a technology like that, right, that you could start to outsource that, and technology to a private sector companies or private sector businesses, wouldn't that monetize? And then it comes back to the community, I don't know, the incubator, the government incubator, whatever that would look like. So anyway, it's kind of crazy that we kind of missed out as the government entity that you were working with of monetizing that. I don't know if that makes sense, if I'm rambling on, but that seems like a huge opportunity where the private sector, again, gets involved. Now they're going to monetize it. They know how to run business. They know how to make money. And, that's where we're at now. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
we did actually put forward a proposal to spin my team. So, but when I say my team, I had about 250 people ultimately working on the program. We did come up with a proposal to spin it out into the private sector, and we'd already started looking to venture capitalists who were already sort of interested in it. It's just that the process of spinning it out would have taken so long that we couldn't support the team. So effectively, all the advantages that we had of spinning out an existing team would have disappeared because the team would have dissipated. So actually,
Right.
that was, this was not such an, it wasn't an emotional decision on my part to leave. It was fairly, fairly sort of thought out on that perspective. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really, really good point, and for me, the real sea change in thinking is that, we've got to get away from thinking about these kind of, that's why I don't like the term surveillance, because when we say surveillance, everybody thinks federal government or they think central government in the UK, whereas if you talk about community health, we've got to get closer to the communities because it genuinely, a catchment area, you guys know this better than me, a catchment area, as I always used to say, it reflects the way people actually live. So what better place to start than a catchment area if you're thinking about, the health of communities?
Yeah. That's good stuff. Anybody else getting, as we move topics, I'm going to go into the benefits of the wastewater, I should say, surveillance. I can't get out of that word right now, but I'll eventually.
Try community.
Any other questions, guys?
I literally got the CDC to agree that they were never going to call it surveillance again. So
I don't know.
Just for awareness.
Well, maybe it's me just stirring it up and I didn't do enough research the right way or something. I don't know, but that's how I got it, as surveillance. I'm like, this is cool. It's surveillance.
Okay. I think they forgot what they promised, but
yeah. So we have this technology that's available of wastewater monitoring. Let's call it that, for making smarter decisions within our communities as far as finding drug usage, finding information about medical issues going on within these communities. Environmental monitoring is what I have here kind of written down. As far as wastewater treatment efficiencies too. Now we're looking at that as another way of understanding our wastewater treatment plants running efficiently. And then it looks like there's a number of different economic benefits to it. Where do you think your struggle is now when you're bringing your technology to the United States? Where are you seeing, besides obviously adopting the technology with the government entities, but what other things have you struggled with?
Sorry,
that was for you, Andrew. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes. I really don't want to, sort of monopolize. I'm aware that it's sort of, I get very passionate about this. I left a very safe civil service job because I'm very passionate about this. So forgive me if that passion flows over into wordiness sometimes. But to be very fair, I think that the United States, you went from zero to you were a little bit behind in this space, and you went from being a little bit behind to being right out on the forefront very fast. And so what we have found is actually a really welcoming market and a really welcoming set of clients, but collaborators, partners. I'll just note, this forum right here, it's like people across the industry engaging with something which actually probably in the UK it's still a bit more, even though we've done a lot on it, it's still a little bit more there's just that forward-looking I think entrepreneurial spirit, which makes it quite easy for a company like ours to come into the States. We're already in the States working in pollution monitoring, so have those conversations with our clients, have those conversations with industry partners, which was really a bit easier. So yeah, I think it's a testament, I think, to the kind of discussions that permeate the business community in the States that we were able to enter the market.
Is anybody got any questions? Because I got a funny thing to kind of add to this. So, Andrew, Do you think we can get to the data so granular that we can figure out like who's eating the most pizza, that kind of stuff? Is it things like that we can really start to break down this data?
Now, when you say who's eating the most pizza,
Or maybe not who, but how much pizza is being eaten within the community, and like what that looks like.
Yeah. So actually, this is again one of the things. You got me all excited. Now here I go. We talk a lot because of COVID. Everybody talks about viruses and pathogens. I know we started with threats. We say, we're in that surveillance world. Everything's threats. We're worried. We're scared. Actually, the really big promise here, while of community health, is health promotion. So living better, living more healthily is really a huge thing. So just for example, obesity. Yeah, we can monitor obesity rates from the sewer system. We can monitor things like diabetes from the sewer system. Right? Why does that matter? Well, if you've got a program that might help reduce diabetes in kids, for example, you can actually monitor that in a community. So you can monitor whether your programs are actually working. Fantastic. In the UK, we've got placement of items in supermarkets is actually now regulated by government. Well, we may or may not agree with that. Doesn't really matter, but it is supposed to cut down on the sort of grabbing of sweet stuffs before you check out. We can find out if the law is actually making a difference from the sewage system. I love that. That's really helping people. What I always used to say in COVID, I engaged a lot with the business community, talk about airports, for example, but I engaged a lot with the business community during COVID. And every time I started out, and of course I'm in the UK, they'd say, well, we don't really want to talk to you because you're going to try and shut down our business. And I learned very fast that, I said, no, actually, my job is to keep your business open. That's what I'm actually trying to do. And I could give you, sort of 37 ways in which we're looking at actually trying to assist and aid keeping businesses open. If we can help a hospital resource better, why can't we help a restaurant know when they might expect less foot traffic because there's more virus circulating in the community? Wow. If you're a restaurant owner, what tremendous intelligence that would be.
Yeah.
Buy a little less this week, less waste, because So it's those sort of things. It's a change in thinking. For me.
Yeah. No, it's amazing, the opportunity here for innovating the wastewater industry and what the potential value is to the communities, and I think there's just there's got to be a better way of educating the government side of what the benefits are. I think that's what we're lacking. It sounds like, I don't know what you guys think, but that's kind of the way I looked at it or think about it now is there an opportunity, I guess, Andrew, for sampling instead of at the effluent, at the wastewater treatment plant? Can we get up into the collection system more? Can we start grabbing data points in different parts of the collection system to get a better understanding of where these problems are occurring and really narrow it down? Because we have an I&I issue where we've never been able to narrow that down, and there's things that we've been trying to figure that out, but the industry's very traditional that way. And then we're talking about maybe doing sampling of wastewater to use it for knowledge and gain intelligence. Is there a way we can grab sampling from different places within the basins?
So literally, you're talking about our core business. So yeah, I don't know if you knew that or not, but that is literally our core business. So the federal program is currently constructed on monitoring of treatment plants. Why do we do that? We do that because it's cheap and easy. Cheap and easy doesn't mean the best. In fact, it's not. In fact, I would argue it's actually not that useful at the end of the day. It's useful if you've got one treatment plant. Look, for example, Cassie, you're in Boise. I know the treatment plant up in Coeur d'Alene, for example. Treatment plant, I think it's about 50,000 people. One treatment plant. You get information there, 50,000. It might be just about useful, right? But we've got a treatment plant in London that serves about 1.5 million, Beckton, largest in Europe. You get a signal there. Say you found something there. In fact, we did. We found polio virus there. What are you going to do with that? Literally you can't do anything with the information. So in fact, in-network sampling really it's not just feasible, but it's necessary. I think to take this to providing the kind of insights that we were talking about, doing all these great, wonderful things, you have to get more granular.
Yeah.
You can't get too granular, and you don't want to get too granular, because then you start running into problems of you sample, with composite sampling. What does the composite sample mean if you've got, it doesn't make any sense. So there's sort of an optimum level. But bottom line is, yes, it is feasible, it can be done, but the technology needs to be better. The hardware needs to be better.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate here with knowing how other people think that, it's a threat. You're a huge threat to a lot of other industries because they often want to offer a treatment, not a cure. And when you can isolate, pinpoint things with such great detail, you can really know like the biometrics of what's going on with humans. What's basically going into their body, and then from the wastewater, what's coming out of their body. And so if you can sample enough to understand the overarching health of that particular area, then you can start saying, well, you need to do this and not do this. So eat this, but don't eat this. And whatever you're going to say not to do, you're going to be a threat, because most of the stuff that they're doing that they're not supposed to be doing, those are huge markets of somebody that has a business model that, that's always the hard thing with like a new paradigm shift type technology, that you have something very special that came out of a very rapid, chaotic situation where we're in crisis mode and people are trying to figure things out rapidly. And when you have to start giving answers and solutions to people in rapid crisis mode, that's when we actually kind of rise up together. Because if you get a collective group and they all start thinking about solutions and how to fix this and understand this, like we actually in America, when we actually get on the same page about making rapid response and collectively, like United States, I don't really think there's any country that really does it better. Because I mean, if you look at World War II, when we put all our thought and our effort into what we had to do and achieve, and you had women out there welding and building, and you had everybody on board with one vision, one focus, it was a train that you were not going to stop at that point. So, now that we're not in crisis mode so much, the thought and the money and the things like that you need to continue to get things to continue to move forward. And, when it's not a crisis and it's not a hot topic, it starts to kind of like fade out. But there's so many great things that you could do with this technology that, I mean, in the United States, I mean, or worldwide, you could really analyze health in a completely different way than we've ever tried to think about it, And so this is definitely a kind of a ground zero paradigm shift type technology. It can do a lot of amazing things. At the same time, you're going to have to figure out a return on investment, monetize business model of who you can take this to. Now, if the hospitals get on board, then you've got a huge mega partner in the hospitals because they got a lot of money. and if the government can pair up with the hospitals, so the insurance companies, the medical thing, if you get the health people, government all on board to figure out how to monetize and possibly create positive policies that can help the healthcare industry, man, you probably, if you can put all those pieces together and get somebody politically to champion some of this stuff to kind of help bolster what you're trying to do and kind of get trying to get the word out and get somebody at a higher level, because somebody at a higher level, this affects their entire family and themselves too, and their future and their kids too, and their health. So you could walk into any room and say, is health important to you? Yeah. They're going to have to say yes.
Also, devil's advocate though, Eric, it goes back to that privacy issue. I think no matter who you get to champion it, when you start telling someone what to do, now all of a sudden I'm going to push back. I'm just being, I'm as in devil's advocate.
Great. Go for it.
I'm going to push back and go, you're using my information to tell me how I should live my life. How is that fair? And back to your point of affecting businesses, I mean, it sounds like Chad really likes pizza. And if we're in a community that eats a lot of pizza, and I'm a health professional coming in as a nutritionist saying, you really need to stop eating so much pizza, I may not want to hear that because that's my favorite food. And B, what about my favorite 5 pizza joints in the 2 miles around my house that I frequent? Are those business owners going to be happy that there's now a hierarchy saying you shouldn't be doing this? Just devil's advocate. That's the first thing that I thought about as your guys' discussion was going back and forth is, again, it goes back to education, but you're always going to have the other side of the party that's going to argue privacy concerns. They're going to argue because they don't necessarily want to hear about the obesity in their area or what the nutrition and how they're not, because they may know it. They don't want to hear it.
Great points, Cassie. That was so much for my pizza. Thank you very much.
I think.
Sorry, Chad.
Well, the next show needs to be about pizza.
Yeah.
Or at least if you come on the show, you get free pizza, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
The one thing, like, I think it's just kind of a joke at this point, I guess, is that, if we even bring up the word privacy, I think in 2023, I don't think there is any privacy.
Yeah.
If I'm being completely honest. Now, when we have big pandemics and a big health issue and we're going in one direction and we need to be going in another direction, that technology is what's going to be able to help shift things. If it can do what Andrew's saying that it can do, that's huge.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Can I quickly say something about pizza?
I got you, Alex.
My favorite
Right,
topping. Look, I said that because you that was the example given. But me personally, I think I obviously haven't landed the message about privacy. I'll just emphasize one more time. There is nothing from you that goes into the data. It's literally nothing from you.
So it doesn't tie a person. Got it.
It's really, really interesting. But Cassie, your point, I loved your point. And I so wish we have more people saying that because, and you asked me about the States, exactly these conversations, I think, are how we get healthy outcomes. Look, every technology can be misused. Let's agree on that. And I think it's great at the beginning of the technology journey to start talking about what are we comfortable with, what are we not comfortable with, I think that's fantastic. So exactly this kind of forum is right. I'll come back to saying that I think ultimately that there is something that people like, which is living in a healthy community. And I don't mean healthy by diabetes. I mean healthy, economically healthy. If your food prices are lower and your sewage disposal prices are lower, because and you've got better restaurants, and that's a great place to live. Let me just tell you something that we really have looked at. We looked at this when I was in government. And there was sort of a vision for us was, well, we already have the pollen count, right? So that goes into the forecast. You put health data into the forecast. For me, it's about empowering people to make good choices. Quick example, what if on Google Maps, you could say, take me from here to here, right? We do that. Avoid tolls, avoid this, avoid this. Oh, and by the way, I'm immunocompromised, so I want to know where I shouldn't stop to get something because there's an outbreak of whatever. That's empowering individuals. So to me, that's a really positive benefit. I don't think many people would be against that. But I get your point, Cassie. What people are against is, wait a minute, if I don't want somebody coming and telling me what I should do because you're judging me, right? And that's what we don't want, So I think what we're doing is we're setting the bounds of the technology, and that's absolutely appropriate. It's a great conversation, and people should speak up about it. I think it's really important.
Yeah,
Alex,
there's a
I don't
lot
know
of.
if I've convinced you, but
I know Alex.
There's a lot
Alex,
of more.
hold on, Eric. Hold on one second. Alex, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so the only thing I was going to say in here is I think we can all agree that this is certainly a public good, and this would benefit our society, just like roads, just like the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, all those kind of things. Then the question becomes who's going to pay for it, and I think that's the challenge. And I think as we've been talking, I was thinking something like the National Weather Service. You think about this is almost it is a public good, and the weather service is a public good, whether it's going to rain tomorrow or we're going to have a hurricane, or this is, to me, very analogous. And there's a part of it that is government funded. There's a lot of money that's been put into satellites and radar systems and all those kind of hardware tools. But then there's also a part of this where there's subscriptions that are paid for by local news. And so there's kind of part of it that's public and part of it that's private. And the challenge here is probably figuring out who's paying for what and how much it's going to cost and evolving that.
Well, and the argument to that, I would say, Alex, is if I don't like the weather, I'm not paying for the weather. I don't get a utility bill every month to pay for the National Weather Service. If I want to ignore it, I can. I have to pay my sewer bill, just like I have to pay my power bill and my water bill. So,
but you're paying for the National Weather Service through your
my wonderful taxes. Yes.
Yeah. So you're paying for it. It's just much more indirect than.
It's much more indirect than a monthly utility bill that you're paying, where the question is, if I'm not educated to understand what the benefit is, am I going to push back and say, why did my wastewater bill, my sewer bill go up? Are we individually paying for this? And if so, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're all
down.
selfish individuals, and we want to know what's in it for us if we're paying for it.
Yeah. My goal is to get your sewer bill to go down, because currently the utilities just give away the information for nothing. So I actually think you're overpaying right now. They're doing nothing with the data.
Well, now I'm calling the city of Boise, Andrew. I'm very upset.
Yeah. They should be extracting the information and selling the data, because it's important data. Alex, it's spot on. Actually, we did a lot of work on the business model in government. We actually think the the Met Office in the UK, we think it's the right model, because exactly that, the Met Office, actually, it's the only bit of government that makes almost all of its money from sales. They provide the weather data for free, which is fantastic, through the developer community, and TV stations do the weather forecasting. But they sell tailored products that save industries a ton of money. For example, the airline industry saves a ton of money through using wind speed data, which allow you to load your plane, optimize your fuel load for a plane. Just one example. So for me, that's exactly the model. Individuals should have the data, should benefit, but actually, we should recoup the money from industries that will, be more efficient because of that.
Yeah, we have 3 minutes basically left. So Eric, go ahead and start and say what you're saying, and then let us kind of end it, and then we'll go through each person. Actually, is what I wanted to do. So go ahead, Eric.
Well, COVID, I think, was in my opinion and every observation, was a weaponized virus. So the U.S. Department of Defense, that's also another outlet to try to pursue, to say, like, if you can collect this data ahead of time, you could be out in front of this thing from a societal threat. And that's exactly what COVID ended up being, is a massive societal threat to human existence and life. And so that's US DOD at that point. That's not EPA, or EPA's budget's like this. The US DOD's budget's like, my hands are going to go off the screen for their budget. They have the largest budget of anybody in the United States. So from a threat to health and direct threat, these are types of weaponized mechanisms in 2023. If you watched all the movies from like 10, 15 years ago, they had a lot of movies about this. So money wise, if you could get the DOD on board to help fund some of this stuff, you could probably monetize and privatize some of this stuff to the hospitals and other places too. So
I could tell Eric's brain was just going all like just spinning over that the whole time. He's like, we can do so much with this. Alex, you're up to kind of end this.
So it sounds like we need a new 3-letter agency. We have the DOD, the CIA, the NRO. What are we going to call this new National Sewer Information Entity? It's got to be 3 letters. So what's it going to be?
Just don't have it starting with SH, okay?
I was just going to say.
It's thinking the same.
Cassie,
that's 4 letters.
Yeah, Cassie, you want to kind of end a little conversation here? Go ahead.
Well, this has been very enlightening. Again, this is not my world. It sounds like Andrew's definitely got the his finger on the pulse on this one, but I really appreciate getting to spend this time with you guys and learn a lot about where our SH goes. Yeah. And now I know what you do with my information. That's creepy.
You keep on saying my information. Yeah. I'm just going to say that it was a real pleasure talking with everybody. I loved it, Chad. Fantastic conversation. Thanks for inviting us all on. And I think it's a sort of watch this space thing. But I think ultimately, if we don't want this technology to be used, it's up to the private sector. It's up to companies like ours to lead the development of this for the public good. I truly believe that.
Andrew, you're doing amazing things and making the world a better place, and that's super important in this day and age, because we need more guys like you out there and girls that are motivated to make a change, like we all are here on this panel as as guests and as hosts. It's just the things that we talk about are real things. We all struggle with the same issues, whether it's bidding, the acceptance of technologies in government. Like, we're all trying to get to a place where everyone understands each other, and I think that's where we need to get to, and that's why we're doing this, is just to talk about it. And thank you everybody for joining me today. I hope everybody got some education on wastewater monitoring, not surveillance. We're not calling it that, okay? But thank you guys so much, and I look forward to next month. And Andrew, you and I will probably have some more conversations for sure. Thank you so much, guys.
And I'd love to catch up with everybody privately. So feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and we can keep the conversation going.
Perfect.
Awesome. Sounds
Thank
good.
you all.
Guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you too. Appreciate it, Chad.
Anytime. Bye-bye, guys.